It's pretty amazing, really, what you can do with technology these days, isn't it?
It is. It is. I mean, yeah, it was always part of the big dream of the future that we were sold, that we'd have jetpacks and video telephones. Well, 1 out of 2 ain't bad, I guess.
Yeah, and you can buy your shopping without having to go out to the shops, but there are no flying cars, and I must admit I'm a bit disappointed about that.
I am too, because I thought the Jetsons' future was actually pretty good, or at least, well, actually, I love the Thunderbirds.
Oh yeah, yes, yeah.
Well, I mean, we've started talking about the future, but I read your bio on your website. You're an archaeologist.
I was an archaeologist, yes, a long time ago. I'm a bit too old and cranky for that now, but yeah, it's a very, very interesting job, and I wish in some ways I've been able to stay in it.
Um, what did you specialize in any area? Was it mostly in England, or did it take you abroad?
It didn't take me abroad, no. When I started out, I had romantic notions of going to Greece or Rome. That didn't happen. I ended up down a muddy hole in the middle of Staffordshire. But I did help add to the picture of the Anglo-Saxon people when they were living in Staffordshire, which is the Midlands part of England. And I also excavated in a couple of other counties in England. I did a little bit of a specialism in archaeological drawing. So I did plans and sections and that sort of thing. And I also did pictures of pottery, flint, that sort of stuff. And I also became a finds coordinator. So I got to process all the things that were actually dug up and work out how to clean them and how to conserve them and how to store them.
There must be a magic moment when you hold a piece in your hand that is not only hundreds of years old, but potentially thousands of years old.
Yeah, it is. It's very special. I'm very interested in material culture, or shall we say stuff, because the stuff, the objects, actually connect you directly to the people who use them. And one of the most interesting things to me that I ever handled came out of an early Anglo-Saxon site in Southampton. And it was a big blob of blue glass that was completely smooth on one side. And it took a while to work out what it was for, but it turned out it was a linen smoother. So once you've woven your linen cloth, in order to close up all the holes within it to stop the air from getting through and make it warmer, make it smoother, you just rub this glass linen smoother over it, and it sort of, gets all the fibers to knit together. I'm sorry, I'm demonstrating on my keyboard. You can't actually see.
Oh, this is absolutely fascinating. It's we tend to forget, I think, how innovative people were in the past. I'm of the C.S. Lewis school, in which we should be aware of the snobbery of chronology, just because people in the periods that we write in. I mean, your current book is in the 16th century. Just because they didn't have Zoom or laptops or anything like that, it doesn't mean they didn't live full, engaged, innovative lives. And I don't know about you, but that's one of the things that attracts me to historical romance.
Yes, and I don't know whether you intended this for this interview, but I might go on a little bit at length about the 16th century. And I do have a few props as well to show you.
We'll I'd love to see them. Yeah.
Zoom. I know that one of the things that you're talking to all the Dragonblade authors about is what was their inspiration for their story for the Christmas anthology.
Yes.
And my current series is set in the Tudor period, as you say, it's the 16th century. I used to be what's called over here a reenactor.
Yeah.
I think it's quite similar to what they do in America, which is live action role play. But in my case, it involved me and about 200 other people going to a Tudor manor house in Suffolk, which is East Anglia. And we had to take on the personalities of the different levels of society. And we had to have a backstory. We had to learn how to speak what we called Tudorese, which was, it was not unlike Shakespeare, but so that everybody could understand it. So we created our own sort of language. And we lived as Elizabethan and Tudor people on this manor house for 1 week, 2 weeks, something like that, performing the tasks that they would have done. It was primarily educational. So during the week, there were hundreds and hundreds of school visits. So the children would all come with their class, they'd all be dressed up in their Tudor costume, and they would interact with us, and they would watch what people were doing. At the weekends, it was open to the public, so the public could come and interact with us as well. And I have to say that that experience probably had the most profound effect on my life. I haven't been there for over 20 years now, but I'm still thinking about it, and I still channel that experience when I'm writing my my stories. And the manor house in the first book, Show's book, even though it's probably back to front, is based on Kentwell Hall, which is the Tudor manor house where I did this reenactment. So yeah, that's where it all comes from. And I do have a few props, but I don't know at what point you might want me to show you the sorts of props.
Now.
Okay.
I'd love to see them. I'd love to see them.
All right.
Oh, look, I don't think anything can beat walking in somebody else's shoes. It's one thing to use our imaginations, and we do a lot, but oh my goodness, the idea of living as a Tudor in a Tudor manor for a week, 2 weeks. Of course, in Australia, we don't have anything like that, because prior to European settlement, sort of Australia's ancient history is so much different.
Okay, lovely. Well, I'll show you a couple of things, and then I'll get back to the Christmas story.
That'd be great.
Okay.
I'm so excited.
When we were doing our reenactment, we had to have the appropriate eating and drinking utensils, and we also had to have the appropriate food as well, because tomatoes hadn't yet been introduced, or potatoes were not introduced by the Tudor period. We couldn't be seen by anybody doing anything inauthentic, like eating tomatoes or potatoes or smoking a cigarette or wearing a watch or anything like that. So everybody had to have their own wooden eating bowl. You also had to have your own drinking vessel. And this is a horn beaker. And horn is, I think you could probably say it was the plastic of the Tudor period. It's the outside part of a cow's horn, and when you heat it up, it becomes malleable and soft, so that you can actually turn it into different shapes. A cup of coffee tastes very strange out of one of these, I have to tell you. And if you pour beer into it, it fizzes over the top. So you learn. Wine is fine. Wine is absolutely fine. So you have to have something like that to drink out of. Okay. Fortunately, you can still find these in antique shops in England. So it is, but there are people who make, modern versions of this. Do stop me when I start getting boring. I'm not offended easily.
It won't be for a long time.
Okay, you had to have your own eating spoon. Obviously, this is a wooden one. The shape of wooden spoons back in the Tudor period were different. They were circular. The bowl was circular. This one has had an awful lot of use. I used to make butter, so it's worn down completely there from me beating up the cream to make the butter. If you're a little bit higher up the social scale, you would have one of these, which is called a Latin spoon. And Latin is an old name for pewter. The composition of pewter has changed a little bit over the ages, but this is what the posh people would have sipped their soup with. You didn't have forks. Forks weren't much in use then. They were using forks in Italy during the Renaissance period, but they weren't really introduced into England until rather later. So it would be unusual to see a Tudor person using a fork to eat, but you all had your knife. And this is a modern replica of a Tudor eating knife in its little scabbard. And you have a cord here so you can attach it to your belt. Most Tudor people had all their bits and pieces attached to their belt and dangling from their belt. So their money purse, their knife, their spoon, lucky rabbit's foot, all dangling from your belt, rather than in a purse or a handbag. That's what it looks like out of its sheath. And this is actually a genuine copy of something that was found in an archaeological site in London.
Right. I take it the blade is steel and the
Yes.
and the handle was that wooden, or is that
The handle of this
bone?
one, this is actually a turned wooden handle.
Right.
I have another one. This is not a totally authentic shape. It has got worn a little bit from me cutting things because I used to work in the Tudor kitchen. But the handle is made from antler.
Right.
So that was another material that was much in use during the Tudor period, and it could be shaped into all sorts of different things. You get it on longbows and on the knocks on longbows. If you want to do a little bit of whisking up in the kitchen, this is what you would use. It's made from hazel twigs, which are very bendy. Unfortunately, when it dries out, they do tend to break off, but very good for beating eggs.
Right.
Right. Pause this for breath, because I do get a bit overexcited sometimes. The other thing really that interested me most was weaving, spinning and weaving. And as well as doing the Tudor cooking, I also got the chance to card my own wool and spin it using a hand spindle. And you have to wash it then. And it was washed in urine to get the lanolin out, because you can't dye it if you leave the greasy stuff in. It was pretty smelly business. I must admit, I've never actually done that personally. I know people who have, but there's only so far you want to take it. So I did actually spin and dye my own wool. This was dyed with weld, which is it's a weed in this country basically, but it's a really nice bright yellowy colour.
Isn't it pretty?
I won't show you that one just yet because that ties in with something I want to say later. And I wove my own Tudor belt on some. So this is wool that I have carded, spun, washed, dyed, and woven. And I'm feeling really privileged to be able to show it to somebody because it's been sitting in a drawer for so long. Thank you for your patience and for watching. Okay, anyway,
I'm absolutely riveted. And I know everyone else will be too, because I look, everybody who's going to be watching this is going to have an interest in history. So to be able to see something that is as authentic as that is just fabulous.
Excellent. You're very kind. Thank you. Now, tying in a little bit more with the Christmas story. Okay. This is the book that is coming out soon. Well, it's up for pre-order at the moment. It's called Lord of the Forest, and it's the third book in the Trysts and Treachery series. And there is a character in that book called Julia Wentworth, and she's not a good person, although she does come right in the end. I don't want to give too much away. And and I thought I could see if I can rehabilitate Mistress Julia Wentworth from that book, put her into a Christmas story, and give her a happy ending, a well-deserved happy ending. But I don't know quite where it came from, but for some reason I just associated Christmas with geese.
Oh yeah,
I
yeah.
think Christmas in the past, goose, you know, it's a nice big bird, and it gives you a Christmas feast. So I had to have a goose in the story. We became quite familiar with geese when we were doing our reenactment at Kentwell Hall, largely because we kept stepping in their droppings, which is a very unpleasant experience. So you learn to dislike geese slightly when you have to live with them in close proximity like that. I've also been hissed at by some very angry geese on one occasion, and I was told that what you do if geese hiss at you is you clap at them, and they are supposed to back off. These ones didn't. They were scary, so I was glad to get out of there. There is also a colour. Tudor names for colours were a bit different to the ones that we have now. But when we were making our costumes, we had to think about what colours they had and what colours they didn't have. And one of the colours that was an option was goose turd green. And there's a genuine Tudor colour, goose turd green. And of course, once you go and tread in one, you know what colour it is.
I imagine it's an olive colour.
Well, this is sort of goose turd green. It maybe I don't know how well it's coming across to you, but it's sort of green, and it should be a bit more yellow.
Yeah, it's a soft minty green is what I'm picking up.
Yeah. Well, imagine it with a little bit more yellow in, and there you've got goose turd green for your Tudor colour. Anyway, going back to how important geese were back in the Tudor period, you didn't just eat them, you could do things as well with goose grease. Goose grease was actually a good base for making your ointments and medicines, and that was another thing I was very interested in, was herbal medicines and the sort of how they looked after themselves health-wise back in the Tudor period. So goose grease was very good for as a base for making ointments. Admittedly a little bit smelly, but you need something like that, and it was plentiful back then. They didn't have petroleum jelly, for example. Right, I just need to find where I put it. Yeah, the other thing that you could do with I don't know, I've lost it. Oh my goodness. The other thing that you can do with geese is you can make pens. You can make quill pens.
Yes.
So you just basically need a goose feather and a sharp knife, and you carve yourself a nib, and then you can write. So the byproducts of geese were actually quite useful.
And this ability then to use all of the animal too. I mean, you were talking about using horns and antlers.
Yeah.
And it was practical and necessary.
Absolutely, yes. You wouldn't want to waste anything. So, working on the premise that a goose was a very valuable thing to have, I had to have the goose in my story. Mistress Julia Wentworth has come down the social tree quite a lot. She's basically living in the dive in London and making her living by selling artificial flowers and decorations that she's made. So she's really come down the social scale. And then one day a goose escapes from the person who's bought it and comes dashing into the yard. And she then has this dilemma. The goose would feed her and the little boy she's looking after for, a week, maybe even longer. And then there's the byproducts. There's the goose grease and there's the quills. She can sell them for pens. So she has to decide whether she's going to keep the goose, which in effect would be stealing, or whether when the owner comes, she's going to give it up to him. So that's basically where the story starts, and it goes on from there. And I don't want to give anything further away, if that's all right.
That is just fine. But I do want to ask you about rehabilitating characters. One of the one of the heroines that I've had, she was actually quite the villain in the first novel that I wrote, and my husband said, "You've got to, I want to know more about this character." So I ended up turning her into a heroine, and I've actually used her a couple of times as an older woman, and there's something really powerful about redeeming characters, finding their flaws are absolutely self-evident, but there's got to be that spark there that that you can work with, that tells you, no, I can turn my life around. I can do the right thing, and there's this really nice redemption arc that takes place. What's your approach to that?
Redemption arc, yes. I think what I tend to do is I think of a situation and I put the character in it, and I think, what would they do, or at least what would they think about doing initially, and then I give them time to maybe consider that there are other options. Mistress Julia Wentworth was worked on quite heavily in The Lord of the Forest in order to get her to be a good person. But unfortunately, she'd been involved with the villain for so long that she got into trouble with her family and she was thrown out by her family. So she was feeling very, very bitter and thinking doing the right thing doesn't necessarily bring rewards. So that's, part of the fun part of this Christmas story, which is her Christmas White Night, is just her finding out that there are kind people in the world, and that if you do the right thing, sometimes you will be rewarded. And that takes us to the chance for happy ever after ending, which isn't easy to do in 14,000 words.
Yes, yeah, and that's it. And I, Alexa said the same thing, and so did Anna Markland, that there is a real challenge and a real discipline in writing a short story, because you've got to tell a complete story, and it's got to be really tight. It's a great challenge. One of the Romance Writers of Australia have got a short story competition, 3,000 words, and that's
short. Yes,
it is. I've done a couple of those, and it's sort of it really, I think that would stretch even the most accomplished author, because the scene setting that one normally does, the length of time you've got for character development is really truncated. So no, sort of well done. I can't wait to read all of the stories in the anthology. Oh Night Divine is going to be great.
Yeah, I think it is. I think people are going to dive in it and they're just going to love it. It's going to be, each story is going to be like opening a Christmas present, because I know they're going to be different. They're all going to be so different from one another. Yeah, so people are going to love that.
Fantastic. So at what point did you decide not just to explore and dig up and catalogue and live history, but also write about it?
Oh, it's a little bit sad, really. But when I was a kid, I was an only child. I don't mean sad in that way. I was an only child, and my father was a head teacher. And so he had to look after me during the long school holidays. And basically he wanted to, go out and do arty crafty things, because that was his hobby. So to keep me quiet, he bought me lots of books. And I also got a membership of something called the Puffin Club.
Oh, yes.
Now, Puffin Books did children's books, exclusively children's books, all around the globe, I think. And I just adored those. And you could join the Puffin Club. And if you joined the Puffin Club, you got a membership book and a secret code, and you got competitions that you could enter. And you got a little magazine that came through every couple of months or every 3 months, I'm not sure, which was just huge fun. And I thought, oh, I want to be an author. I want to write books like this. And I wrote to Puffin Books And I said, I want to be an author. And they were so sweet. They wrote back and said, yeah, go for it. So, you know, in theory, I've wanted to write for a long, long time. And another thing that my dad used to keep me quiet during the school holidays was to get me to write a long story. So I'd come home at the end of the school term, and I'd have a wad of paper and some coloured felt pens, and I'd draw pretty patterns in the margins, and I'd write my story and I'd illustrate my story. One of them was 200 pages long.
Wow.
And I thought, I can do this, I can be an author. And then it all went wrong. You know, life got in the way. And I didn't start writing again until, I don't know, something like 1997, something like that. I thought, why don't I give it a go? And I had the opportunity because I had just left the place where I was living with my partner. He had to stay on and work for another 6 months. So I had that 6-month period when I was coming home from work and there was nobody there, not even a cat. So I sat down and I started writing. I filled my hours by attempting to write a historical novel.
I think that's fabulous. And you've done it. You've got 3 series at the moment?
I've done 2 series with one publisher. I've done a single book with another, and I've got this Tudor series with Dragonblade. And I've also put my name down for writing one of the Lion's Den series books, which I think is going to be exciting.
It's good fun. I really enjoyed writing mine, and that was an interesting experience because I'd started writing before the first book came out, so I just had the guidelines. So and I've only read a couple of them in the series so far, and again, that's another thing. We've all got the same guidelines, but the stories are so completely different.
Yeah.
So I've decided I'm going to do another one for not next year, but the year after.
Is this still part of the Lion's Den series?
Yeah, called His
Lion. It's carrying on then.
Oh, it is. His Lion Eyes is what I've decided to call the second one. I have a vague idea of a plot, and that's it. But
yeah. But yes, I've got an idea for my plot as well. And I want to call it The Lion and the Lamb.
Yes.
You know, you can play with the titles, can't you?
And
lots of scope.
That's the fun part, which is where The Lion Sleeps Tonight, as soon as Kathryn did the announcement that she was doing this new series, and it was a play on lion, it was sort of, well, I've just got to do that. And the story emerged from the title.
I think Love is just a whim away is just hilarious. That's brilliant.
It was the easiest tagline ever. Are you going to continue working in the Tudor period? How long is this series that you're doing for Dragonblade?
There are 5 books in the series. The 4th book is completed and it's been sent back to for the developmental edits. The 5th book is not yet written, but it's all plotted out. And then so that'll come out next year. And then there's the Lion's Den one to do. So we'll see what happens from there on.
Oh, fantastic! What is your approach to writing? The classic question: are you a plan? I was getting the words all wrong here. Are you a plot? Sorry, I will enunciate. Are you a plotter or are you a pantser?
A plotter. In actual fact, most of my published books, the ones that have been published, you know, by proper publishers, traditional publishing, is they've come out of the National Writer Novel in a Month
oh yes,
campaign scheme thing. So you have to write your book, your 50,000 word novel, throughout the month of November. And I think I started doing that in about 2016, something like that.
Right.
So you have to, if you're going to write that much, and I started doing it when I was still working, so I had to sort of, write during lunch hours and come home at night and write, and then after my evening meal I'd come back upstairs, get on the computer and write. You just went for it, and you had to get 50,000 words done. This was the challenge: 50,000 words in a month. And I thought, trying to fit this in around my working life is going to be quite tricky, so I need to be really well planned. So yeah, everything was in place. I had all my my beat sheet done and everything organized, and the characters and the place names and the research and everything all done. And then during NaNoWriMo month, I just sat there and I just went and scrawled.
Because
so,
that's 1,667 words a day.
Yeah, absolutely. How did you do that?
Because I've checked into it.
Okay.
and
yeah.
I'm a little less disciplined.
Oh, that's all right. It still comes out in the end, doesn't it? Yeah. I think it matters.
It does. It does. And I find for me that the characters end up revealing more than I'd initially thought or had started out as I write, and it's really interesting the direction they go in. So I just let them take me for a walk.
Yeah, they do have a tendency to do that, even when you are well planned. Sometimes your characters won't do what you were expecting them to. It just seems natural and logical that they should do a particular thing, and you think, hey, that's not in the script, but you've just got to let them do it, because you get so much into the headset of the person whose point of view you're writing. You've just got to go with that.
Yeah, exactly.
It's part of the fun, isn't it? You sort of step back and you think, these characters are really living, aren't they? They're doing their own thing. It's magic.
And that is it. They are real, and I tell other writers, don't agonize. In the end, it's not your story; it's your character's story. You're just the conduit through which it all flows. So as long as your characters are authentic in of themselves, just let them do what they need to do.
Good. Yes.
That's fantastic.
I must be doing it right then, if we agree.
Well, if I agree with you, it must be right. Tell me about your typical Christmas, since we're doing a bit of a Christmas flavour.
Yeah, well, I want to sort of sidestep that very slightly, and go back to the Tudors, because I rather like the way that they spent Christmas. I'm all for the 12 days. Absolutely, I think you should celebrate for 12 days. I like the fact that there was a lot of feasting. We still carry on that tradition, obviously. We have our Christmas feasts. Tudor food was a little bit different to what we have now, but far more interesting than I think a lot of people would realise. The Christmas pudding that you would have, or your mince tart or mince pie that you would have during the Tudor period, would have actual mince meat in. It would be meat and fruit. And having made some of these things and having eaten some of them, dried fruit, so like raisins, sultanas and things, they're absolutely delicious. So, we've taken the meat out of plum pudding now, but, back then it had meat in. Also, one of the traditions that you had back then was having a Lord of Misrule. So basically you choose somebody to be in charge of the festivities, and they can make you do forfeits. And I did go to the one and only one and only medieval banquet I've ever been to. the Lord of Misrule was chosen by putting a dried bean into the pudding. So whoever got the dried bean when they had their dessert had to be Lord of Misrule, and they could make all the guests do forfeits and party pieces and tell jokes and sing songs and play instruments and that sort of thing. So yes, oh, and the drinking as well. I'm not much of a drinker, but I do like the idea of mulling wine and mulling ale and mulling cider.
Oh, the spices.
Yeah. So just sort of, I once did a Christmas dinner for 9 people. Now that's the biggest I've ever done. I know a lot of people do much bigger ones than that, but I did a Christmas dinner for 9 people. And I sort of used what I'd learned from being in the Tudor kitchen and put that into practice when I did this modern day Christmas dinner. One of the things that I made was a game pie. And I have to say, it took me pretty much all day to make this thing, because you had to sort of strip the meat from the pheasant and can't remember what else, a rabbit. We had rabbit in it as well. And it takes a long time to strip a bird and put all the meat in. It was a raised pie, so it was quite a high thing. You know, it was like building a little castle out of pastry. And of course, you had to decorate it really beautifully. And then it goes in the oven, and it takes goodness knows how long in the oven, hours, literally hours.
Yeah.
But it was absolutely wonderful. And the other thing that I did, which I stole from what I learned as a, reenacting Tudor life, was using crab apples. So I used crab apples in, did I use wine? Yes, I think I used wine, crab apples, wine, sugar, and they were roasted in the dish that the, what do we have? Let's say goose. I can't remember if it was goose or not, but it was, whatever the bird was that we had, they were roasted in the dish with it. So you had that kind of tartness and sweetness roasted with the bird, and that was absolutely delicious as well. And then to wash it down, I made something called lamb's wool. And basically that is similar thing. You get your crab apples, and do you have crab apples over there?
No, I've not encountered them. No.
They're basically a wild apple, so they're the ancestor.
They're quite small, aren't they?
They're very small, and they're very tart and bitter, but gradually we hybridize them, and so we've got sweet apples and big apples.
I think Granny Smith may have been a cultivar of crab apples at one point.
Yeah.
And that's probably the tartest that we get here.
Yes, yeah. So you can pick crab apples in the wild, but some people have them as ornamental trees in their gardens as well. So I just collected the crab apples from a wild crab apple tree, and I roasted them in the oven, and they sort of puff up, and they have a sort of foamy aspect. And you put sugar over them as well, or honey, whatever you prefer. And then get a big pot. You pour your ale into your big pot, and then you float your roasted crab apples in the ale. And it's best not to eat them. It's best to just sort of, they flavour the ale. They flavour the heated ale. And that's lamb's wool, and I assure you, it may sound a bit weird, but it's absolutely delicious.
No, I can imagine. Oh, I'm doing another magazine for December, and I'd love to focus on one of the recipes. So I'll chat to you later about that. And,
okay, I've got lots of recipe books. Yeah.
That'd be fantastic. This has been so much fun. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you.
This has been great. We'll cut the interview together. We'll get it up sort of sometime over the next week or 10 days. And I've thoroughly enjoyed it, and it's lovely to have a chat. It's never quite the same across social media.
No, actually seeing somebody's face and hearing their voice, that's very special, isn't it? Yeah.
It is. Thank you very much, and
You're welcome.
have a great rest of the day.
Yeah, well, I know you're not going to have much more of the day because it's quite late where you are, but yeah. No, I've got the work to do now. I shall get back to the keyboard. Anyway, well, thank you ever so much. It was a lovely idea, and thank you for letting me join you, and it's been wonderful.
It's my absolute
pleasure.
Seeing
the results.
Definitely. Okay, take care.
All right, take care, Elizabeth.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.